Hi, I'm Skipper Chung Warson. I'm a design director in San Francisco. And thanks for listening to How This Works. This is a show where I invite people on to talk about a topic that they know incredibly well. And today, I'm lucky to have with me Selena Rosanbalm. She's going to talk to us today about being a musician and the work that she's done to write, record, release, and promote an independent album in 2020 with everything that's going on. Thanks for being here, Selena.
Thank you for having me.
So let's dig in. Tell us a few things. Who are you? From where do you hail? Where in the world do you call home? Like all of those juicy intro bits about you.
Yeah. Well, I live in Austin, Texas, the live music capital, although not so much these past few months.
Sure.
I was born in Colorado into a military family.
Okay.
So moved around a lot as a really young person. So born in Colorado, and in the first 10 years of my life was in, Colorado, Mississippi, Virginia, New Mexico, and then to Texas. And I've been here since I was about 10 or 11. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But still have family in Colorado as well, and people in New Mexico. So it's funny that the places I grew up are still kind of connected a little.
At least geographically, sort of in the
anyway.
Middle-ish, bottom, the southern part of the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. So what's something about you that many people might not guess? Like something you feel comfortable sharing?
I was asked a similar question recently, and it was for a music publication, and I told them that I love yacht rock, which is true.
And what is yacht rock? What is yacht rock for people who don't know what yacht rock is?
Yacht rock is the very best musical genre, of course.
Of course.
Musical acts such as Michael McDonald,
okay.
the Doobie Bros,
okay.
Bobby Caldwell. I would lump into this. A lot of people may not know Bobby Caldwell. Kenny Loggins, of course.
Of course.
Anyway, so that's musically, that's something you may not guess. But I usually, for a interesting and strange tidbit about myself, I like to share that I have sort of a fear of sunken ships, which seems arbitrary and unlikely, but they freak me right out.
So does this encompass like things like scuba diving? Like, is that something that you would never do?
Oh yeah. I would never, ever scuba dive or snorkel. Really anything that lives in the water, I'm afraid of, and things that do not belong in the water that are there also freak me out. So,
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. So Selena, what are we talking about today? What is the topic in which you consider yourself very well versed?
Well, I made a record this year, so we'll be talking about the making of the album and sort of the process of finishing it up and releasing it in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
What a time.
What a time. Yeah. So I'd love to rewind a little bit. So I want to get into the meat of that, because that process, being connected to you and being your friend, like I've seen you doing some of the promotional things that you've been doing over the last few months. I want to dig into some of those component parts. Like, what are the intricate parts of, releasing an album? What are the things that are unique to this year? But I want to rewind and go back to how you started as a musician. How did you first discover music in general? Was it sweet, sweet yacht rock?
I wasn't quite into yacht rock yet when I discovered that I loved to sing. I was more listening to Disney musicals.
Okay.
Naturally. So I was in the 5th grade when I did my first performance.
Okay.
Me and a few friends did I Just Can't Wait to Be King from The Lion King.
Ah, sure.
At our 5th grade talent show.
Okay.
And that was the first time that I noticed, like, oh, I really love doing this thing. Like, I would like to continue doing so. And I joined choir the following year.
Okay.
And that was kind of the beginning of everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the, and for some people, titles are really important. Calling yourself a writer, a musician, like whatever that is, what is the first thing that you made where you felt like a musician?
Oh, I think the formation of my first band is what made me really feel like a musician. it's in music school. I studied musical theater in college, and where I went to school, there was like a stark divide between the instrumentalists and the vocalists. So
Hmm.
it's like a kind of a weird social and political thing inside the music school. But
And which
you
side
know,
did you align to?
I was on the vocalist side,
Okay.
just because I was one, and I didn't play an instrument at the time.
Okay.
So it was funny. Like the instrumentalists wouldn't refer to us as musicians. They would say, "Oh, it's the
Oh.
musicians and the vocalists," and that always
Oh.
was just a little dig. So
Yeah.
I kind of carried that with me. I did some theater after graduating from college, and when I decided to drop that and start a band, that was the first time I really felt like I feel comfortable calling myself a musician. Nobody can say that I'm not. I've made this band.
Yeah.
I'm playing guitar.
Yeah.
That was the first time that I felt like, okay, yeah, I am a musician.
Okay. And how long ago was this generally?
About 10 years, 2011.
Okay.
So yeah, almost 10 years.
About 10 years. Okay. I had a question around, oh, you talked a little bit about how the musicians or the instrumentalists would dig at the vocalists. Is there a way that the vocalists would dig at the instrumentalists?
Uh,
Like, would you all invite the instrumentalists to karaoke parties and
I don't think they would have been caught dead at a karaoke party. But we loved it. Oh my god, we used to go out as a group. Like a few friends of mine, I remember, would go to this joint called City Walk and go to the karaoke room there and just like fucking murder everyone in there. It was so funny. I don't really remember, digging back at the instrumentalists,
Sure.
but that doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah.
My memory is a little selective at times, but yeah, I don't think so much.
Okay, that's fair.
Mhm.
So what's something that an average person doesn't know about being a musician, or like maybe like what's exciting for you about being a musician?
The most exciting thing for me is the performance aspect. The rest of it is kind of difficult and tedious. My musical beginnings are in performance. It
Mm-hmm.
was like when I performed, that was the first time it got me. I don't know. I think the thing that people don't realize is that it's not, the perception of a musician is like of a famous musician. So
Mm,
you think, oh, this person's a musician. Oh, cool. They're like Bono. They're out there doing huge concerts. They're raking in the cash. Blah blah
sure.
blah. When it's like, no, like we're doing 5 gigs a week and are kind of barely making rent,
Mm,
and it's work. I think people don't see it as work,
yeah.
and that's not to say that it's a bad thing, not to make it a negative at all, but
Yeah.
it's a job.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Before we started recording, you said you had often a comment about being nervous. Do you still get nervous before, and we'll get into the particulars of like how you're performing and doing some of your showcasing of your craft these days, but do you still get nervous before you perform?
It sort of depends on the situation. If I have a show at a new venue, I will
Mm,
usually be nervous for the first time there.
okay.
It's not so much the show that makes me nervous. It's like the waiting, like waiting around the house the day of a show is just the worst. Just like waiting to get there and to go and do the thing. But yeah, if it's somewhere I've played before, then no, I don't have nerves so much anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's jump. So, is there anything else you want to talk about generally as a musician that you think listeners are curious about?
I don't know. Another thought, something people may not be aware of. I think it's also an assumption that every musician has a manager, has like a
Mm,
team behind them,
mm,
kind of helping them do stuff. But for most people that I know, they're just doing it by themselves. So like getting the show, promoting the show, and I know we'll get into this later, but
yeah.
booking a show, promoting a show, doing the show, selling the merch, buying the merch in the first place, having
Yeah.
it made. It's really a one-man show for most people that I know.
Yeah. Because that's a cost normally, especially if you don't have a team of people or a team that helps support your output as an artist. So that merchandise is often costs that you as a musician have to carry.
Yes, exactly. Hmm.
Yeah. I'd love to talk a little bit about, just so we have a little bit of comparison and contrast, because we've talked a little bit about your beginnings, in terms of doing work in university. You mentioned like you didn't feel like a true musician until you started your first band. Can you talk to me a little bit about that process, that moment for you, like when you started a band and it was about 10 years ago? What did that look like? What did that feel like? Like what's a day in the life for you on like a when you would perform as part of your band?
Well, it was, kind of one of those big life moments that happens every few years when I had decided I'm going to stop doing theater pretty much completely. I went
Hmm.
and got a big tattoo, which typed myself out of all of the roles. Um, it just kind of shifted focus. I had become frustrated with having to always be a different person than myself on stage.
Okay.
That was a big part of the shift to doing music only. Yeah, so I mean the first thing was to try to find a gig, when nobody knows who you are. That was
Mm,
really a challenge in the first year. It was like, okay, what's more important, to find a gig first, or to find a time to rehearse first? Who are the musicians that are going to play with me?
sure.
Nobody knows who I am. How will this work? So I reached out to some friends who were already in bands that I knew, and just kind of told them, "Hey, I'm working on this thing that maybe that would be of interest to you."
Yeah.
So in the early days, it was just about building the band, building a little team around myself,
Yeah.
so that we could play these gigs. And then it was trial by fire doing the gigs, because it's a whole different medium of performance. And the first year or 2 years was just lots of learning, lots of mistakes,
Sure.
learning how to lead a band in rehearsal, more importantly learning how to lead a band on stage, cueing endings, learning how to talk about music in a whole different way.
Mm,
Because for my whole life, it was reading notes off of a page. Like, these are the notes that you sing, these are the words that you say.
okay.
Don't stray from that.
Sure.
And there's a whole, like, on stage language for musicians, like, the Nashville number system. You're calling tunes, like, if someone doesn't know it, you say, oh, it's just 145. And most people would have no idea what you're talking about. But
Ah,
for
okay.
musicians, it's like, oh yeah, those are the chords that I play. Okay, got it.
And what did you
Cool.
call it? The Nashville number system?
Or just the number system. Like, what are the numbers to the chords of this song?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you want to mention the name of the band while we're talking about it?
Yeah. Yeah. It was called Rosie and the Ramblers.
Okay.
I should I tell you the genesis of that name?
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
Rosie and the Ramblers. So I knew it was going to be a country band. It's been my favorite music for forever. I was afraid of using my actual first name because I didn't want there to be any confusion and for people to think that we were a Tejano band or like a Latin music band. Because we live in Texas.
Sure.
We're not far from Corpus Christi.
That's
I
right.
didn't want people to see Selena and then be devastated when they showed up. I was like,
Selena
all right,
is a state treasure, if not a national treasure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. I was like, well, shoot, what am I going to do? So
Yeah.
I kind of stole my father's nickname. He was in the Air Force, and so was his dad.
Okay.
And their call signs were Rosie, last name Rosenbaum. So they went by Rosie
Okay.
when they were flying. So I stole that and added a phrase at the end, Rosie and the Ramblers.
Yeah.
Sounds Western,
Yeah.
sounds Southern,
Yeah.
sounds something.
Yeah.
So that's how I got that name.
And you all, as far as I can tell, you all did release an album.
We did.
Okay.
Yes, in 2014.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just the one.
What was that process like? And I want to set this up as a way to maybe contrast a little bit of, and I know that, your current work is, I mean, you do have a backing band, but, as a solo musician, it might be a little bit different, but I'd also like to contrast the time of like releasing an album in 2014 versus releasing an album today. So like, what was that process like? You were you were a band, you've been performing for a few years, you decide to release an album.
The Ramblers wasn't so much a collaborative project either. It was, kind of similar to what I'm doing now. The songs were all mine, and
Okay.
weren't really written by the rest of the band.
Okay.
So that aspect was kind of similar, but at that time it was easier. I reserved the studio space and we went and recorded the record, and then I set a release date, and it was easy. Like things just kept rolling along,
Okay.
and I printed CDs only. I didn't print any other kind of listening media.
Like no vinyl, no
No vinyl, no like cassette tapes
cassette
for
tapes.
the
Okay.
niche crowd.
Is that still a
um,
thing? People still make
some people
cassette
are
tapes?
doing it. Yeah, dude. Some people I know, they do like small run cassette tapes.
Huh.
I don't
Okay.
have anywhere to play a cassette tape anymore.
Yeah, neither do I. So I don't.
No.
Huh. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Anyway, it felt pretty easy. It just kind of like rolled itself along in 2014, and I set the release date, and we had a release party, and so many of my friends came, and I sold a bunch of records at that, and it
Nice.
was seamless. Felt like.
Yeah.
um, this year was a little different.
Yeah. Yeah. How did the process for this start for you?
Well,
So let's
so at the
let's
end,
let's let's rewind to not just the record, because I do want to contrast that, but I love, when did you decide? So Rosie and the Ramblers, when did you decide that you needed to own your name and be, be a musician in the world that used your name?
in 2019, I think is when I started. I was kind of writing some different stuff and writing some more opinionated things, and just kind of
Okay.
drifting into non-country territory,
Okay.
whatever that means. um, I just felt like I was starting to feel really like pigeonholed by the name of the band, and feeling like, if people come to see a band called Rosie and the Ramblers, they expect this,
Yeah.
X kind of
Yeah.
music.
Yeah.
And I
Did
wasn't.
you all do, did you do anything sort of like, and this is probably not the right word, but did you all do anything off brand in that way? Did you have a song that wasn't necessarily country that came into your vernacular?
Yeah, I think we had a few of those, and I started to add some covers that were definitely not country. We did like an Elvis Costello tune, and
Oh,
we were
nice.
doing like just kind of whatever was of interest. And I was like, okay, this, maybe we should change this.
Okay.
Also, it gets tiring explaining the name Rosie and the Ramblers, because everyone's like, "Oh, are you Rosie?" And I'm like, "Yes, but no." Sort of. Um,
Right.
so I just, last year, by the end of the year, I was like, okay, I'm just going to drop it. I didn't know how to like kind of transition, be like, okay, so I'm not going by this name anymore. I'm going to go by my actual name, and have people not freak out like, oh my God, is the band breaking up? And I'm like, not really, because it wasn't really like a collaborative thing anyway. So I was like, okay, well, what would make it clear? I'll make a record. And I already
Okay.
had a good handful of songs that I needed to record anyway, that
Okay.
were written over, I don't know, the past 5 years or so. And I needed a
Okay.
few more. So I early this year finished up writing the rest for the record.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like it was a very natural thing where not only did you own yourself as a musician, right? Getting the tattoo was part of that, but then also, you went from using, this nickname, to then wanting to claim your own name.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because why not? The whole point of starting music was to be myself anyway, and it took me years to realize, oh, I've created like a character for myself. That was unintentional.
Yeah.
So
So you have a handful of songs in 2019 that you want to record. You write some more over the course of the rest of 2019 and 2020. In the timeline of things that are happening in the world, I think it was the top of 2020 when we all became aware that there was COVID-19 out in the world, right?
Hmm.
At the beginning of March is when, at least in California, the shutdown happened in earnest, and in other parts of the country as well. What does your world look like alongside these current events?
So I've worked as a day job at a coffee shop in town for almost 8 years. I think it's a great and flexible day job.
Sure.
So I think it was like mid February, probably, when we kind of started talking about COVID, and everyone had heard about it and nobody really knew what it was.
Yeah.
Um, but it was being talked about, and then me and the band went into the studio the last week of February, and we're there for
And this is you and the Ramblers.
me and my current band. So
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we went in the last week of February and knocked out all the songs and got it done. And I think two. Well, let's see. I'm trying to think. I lost my job at the beginning of the pandemic because they laid off like 30 employees,
Wow.
and I think that was March 13th or 14th. I think so.
Yeah.
I finished recording the album. Was starting to look at finding someone to master it. Was still working on mixing it down, and suddenly COVID is in the U.S. and people are freaking out and things shut down. And then I lost my job, and then it was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay.
Right.
So, like, am I going to get to finish this record? Like,
Sure.
where is my money going to come from?
Right.
Did I just do the stupidest thing I've ever done? Because I had just, spent all of the money on renting the studio and had, paid the musicians, and was like, shit. um,
So you're already planning like a big life change. And then on
yeah.
top of it, life gives you a big life change, taking away the stability that you had in your side job. And yeah, you have many, many feelings.
Yes. Lots of feelings, lots of worry. It's funny though, in the beginning well, nobody knew how long this was going to last.
Sure.
Of course none of us could have predicted the scope of this thing. So it
Yeah.
was like the day I got the email that I had lost my job, I was like, huh, okay. And like I didn't cry, and I wasn't like panicked about it. But a few days later, and maybe even like a couple weeks later, was like,
Hmm.
oh no, oh no, like this is getting real quick.
Yeah. It's not isolated to your the coffee shop business where you worked. Like you weren't going to be able to find another job
Right.
in this way. Like, so this is part of a much larger and, to your point, timeline uncertain problem.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just kind of one of those funny things when you're really excited about something, and I had just finished recording this project, and so
Yeah.
was like breathing a sigh of relief about that.
I mean,
And
talk
then
about clearing your to-do list.
no kidding. uh, yeah, it did kind of turn into too much time to work on album stuff. Kind of jumping ahead. So we had finished. Usually I would go into the studio and sit with the engineer, and we would mix it down in the studio and be done with it.
Hmm.
But we couldn't see each other anymore, of course, for
Sure.
safety reasons. And so
Sure.
he was mixing and then sending it to me, and I was listening at home with nothing else to do. So I just was like obsessing over the mix of the record, and was like spent much too much time on it, like way too much
Sure.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to. Well, I don't know if I was the one who stopped it. I think maybe my boyfriend was like, I think it's probably good at this point. It's probably fine now.
Right.
Yeah.
What
So
is just for some of our listeners who don't necessarily understand the nuance, and I don't understand it, but like so you record, you go in, you have microphones, instruments are plugged in, you record the album. What is the difference between like recording, mixing, and mastering? Like, what is that process?
yeah. So when you record, so I like to record as live as possible, and what that means
Okay.
is having everybody at the studio at the same time and like playing as if it were a live show.
Yeah.
as opposed to everybody coming in separately and recording their parts and then like layering on from there.
So like guitar recording separately, drums recording separately, and then sort of like putting it all together, assembling it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So we recorded everything as live as we could. So there was an aspect of mixing at that point. So the engineer, the guy who was recording everything, came through and he got levels on everybody and would adjust. Oh, the vocals are a little too quiet. I'm going to pull them up here.
Sure.
The guitar is too loud. I'll pull it down here. So that's like the basic levels, like at the time of recording. The
Yeah.
mixing process is kind of fine tuning those levels because you can
Okay.
adjust everything afterwards. Everything is on, even when you record all together, all of the sounds that you're pulling are on separate tracks. So it's like,
Okay.
and it gets it's really a lot of tracks because you think, oh, the drum kit, but no, it's like the snare drum has a microphone, the kick drum has a microphone. So
I
all of
see.
those levels are adjustable.
Okay.
So the mixing is adjusting those and making sure they sound as best as they can.
Okay.
And then
And then
after,
what is mastering?
yeah, so mastering is where my knowledge gets a little fuzzy. I don't exactly know what they do when they master. I've been in a
Yeah.
mastering studio. I've watched someone master my record. I don't know what he did.
That's fair.
I do
That's fair.
know that it came out sounding much better.
Okay.
Yeah,
So there's definitely a before and after.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you have recorded the songs, you're mixing them. Like what's and you've talked a little bit about what's happening in your world. What would have happened like if you rewound to and understanding that Rosie and the Ramblers was a totally different time and it was a different project. Like what would have happened at that point in the process for you, in terms of the record, releasing it, touring it, like those sorts of things. Like what would have been the timeline in 2014?
If I had made another record, you're saying, or with the first record?
With if you were making your 2020 record, if you were making that back in 2014,
Okay,
like what would the next steps be?
got it. Yeah, so touring is a great example. I think I certainly would have had a tour ready to go after the record came out. You know, it it's funny to think how I felt like it was so much work in 2014 when I did put out that first record, but now
Mm.
to do the same thing again seems like so easy compared with what's happening now. Uh, so yeah, would have gone through the whole process that I've just described. Gotten the actual album done.
Yeah.
I would have maybe hired a publicist if I had
Okay.
done this second record at that time, which I did do this
Okay.
year. But we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Would have certainly tried to tour at least regionally, at least through the state and maybe up into Oklahoma, maybe the Southwest a little bit,
Okay.
which is just a total nightmare when you're booking everything by yourself. Woo! Booking a
Yeah.
tour sucks. It sucks. That's the side of the music biz that really blows.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that probably would have been it. Then there would have been hopefully some residual buzz around town about the record.
Yeah.
Just trying to get some more high profile shows in town. Hopefully have some good press about it. So
Yeah. Isn't just as a side note, I was thinking about this. Wasn't one of the things that the company that put on the Fire Festival, wasn't that something when they initially started they were trying to solve for musicians as like how to book shows easier?
oh man, I don't remember. I
Okay.
like watched a doc on the Fire Festival,
Yeah.
one of the two that were out. I don't remember a whole lot about that, but hey, that would have been
Yeah,
great.
I think the Fire Festival definitely takes up most of the oxygen in that story, so I'm having a very dim memory of it as well, so
Yes, very
maybe
much.
that won't make it in. Okay, so let's come back to 2020. You finished the album. You finished Selena Rosenbaum. What what are you doing, and where are you in the year?
I think I finally sent Well, when did I finish mastering? I think it took until like May for me to get
Okay.
the mix and the mastering done.
Okay.
And again, that would have happened so much quicker if I hadn't had so much time on my hands. Cuz even with the
Okay.
mastering, it was like, you know, when you have all the time in the world, of course you're going to listen to it obsessively and be like,
Yeah.
like I don't know about this little thing. So the guy who did the mastering was very patient with me because I kept
Yeah.
coming to him with little tiny tweaks. He's like, "Oh, can you do this?" Um, and so I finished it finally. I think in May. And then I researched where to get CDs printed cheaply,
Okay.
but it seems pretty standard across the board. But I knew I wanted to do vinyl this time,
Okay.
which is it's so cool. It's just so cool to have, you know, a vinyl record that you are on. That's like
Yeah.
that's crazy. That's a crazy thing. So I did a lot of research on some vinyl companies, and I wound up choosing a local one,
Cool.
which was cool. That whole process actually turned out to be sort of a nightmare. Uh, but
In terms of juggling logistics or costs or like what was hard about it?
well, it was a little more expensive to use the local folks, but I was like, well, you know, they don't have to mail them. I'm gonna go pick them up because I was concerned about shipping vinyl. It's like, ugh,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
what if half of them are broken?
They are delicate.
They're delicate, yeah, and expensive
Right.
per piece. You know, whew.
What is the
So
cost difference between like a CD and a piece of vinyl to like at cost? Like what is it?
yeah, CDs you can produce. I mean, for like I think as low as around $1 per CD, like the
Wow.
disc and the jacket
Okay.
together. So you can do them pretty cheaply. Vinyl, I think mine came out costing about $11 a piece, 11 or
Wow.
$12 a piece.
Yeah.
So that adds up quick.
Yeah.
So, you
Yeah.
know,
The margins are very different. Yeah.
they're very different. Yeah. I guess I kind of glossed over the part about like album artwork and all of that.
Oh yeah, let's talk about because the artwork and we'll link to this in the show notes, but it looks great. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to talk about that creative process because we've talked a little bit about the making of the record process, and it's reminding me also we haven't really talked about the things that were hard about the actual like writing of the song. So maybe we rewind a little bit to that as well. So yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit about like the visuals for the album, like the design, like how did those come about?
I knew I wanted a photo of myself on the record because I knew it would be self-titled. So this is
Sure.
kind of, you know, showing the world, this is my name, this is what I look like, here is
Yeah,
my record.
that's
Um,
right.
so I had scheduled a photo shoot. I did that in May.
Okay.
Um, it was just me and the photographer in his studio, so it was very safe
Yeah.
there. But my original idea for the cover was I had brought like a bunch of outfits to his place, and I was gonna put all these different versions of myself on the cover because a comment that I get a lot is like, "Oh wow, you have a lot of looks." It's like, yeah, why not? Like, why shouldn't I? Yeah,
Sure.
that's fun.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna lean into that, you know, with this album cover, and I'll be like in the same pose but wearing all these different things.
Oh, nice.
And so we took all those photos, but the photographer, his name's Daniel Cavazos. He's awesome. He had all these colored backdrops. Um,
Okay.
so he had this yellow one hanging when I walked in. It was like this marigold color, kind of striking yellow. I was like, oh wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's really something. And I had brought this green jumpsuit and I like pulled
Nice.
it out of my bag and held it up against the yellow. And we were both like, oh yeah, that looks so cool. So I went and put that on and we took some pictures there. And yeah, we didn't know till he was done, you know, kind of fixing up all the photos, what we were going to use. But the photo is
Yeah.
super striking. It was just, oh, I just have it right here. Oh, my new vinyl record.
You have
Wow.
a piece of vinyl there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it just was so cool. The color combo, we just had to use it.
Yeah. So I wonder that yeah, the art is striking. So I love the way it looks and it looks and feels different and especially feels I think very optimistic in this time of like we don't have a lot of things that are sort of feeling good in the world. So I love the way that it looks.
Hmm.
I'd love to sort of back up a little bit to, because, for someone who's been working as long as you have, as a performer, as a musician, you kind of threw off the thing of, yeah, I had 5 songs written and then, I wrote a few more. But for a lot of people, that's an inconceivable task. This idea of, not just writing lyrics, but then writing music and writing, all of the other pieces of it. So can you talk to me a little bit about what songwriting was for this album?
Songwriting is such a funny thing. I think it's really different for every songwriter. So I almost always, there are exceptions, but like 95 time, I start with lyrics.
Okay.
Usually I'll have a phrase, like, if I hear a phrase throughout the day, or if I think of something interesting, I'll like keep a note in my phone. So I just have like a list of phrases, whether in a notebook or on my iPhone or whatever. So usually I have a jumping off point there.
Okay.
Um, I historically haven't really like had any framework in mind when I've started a song. I just, sit down with the phrase, start elaborating on it, and kind of see what happens. Almost without exception, the things that I write are super personal, very much pulled from my actual life.
Yeah.
And most of the songs on this new record are that. A lot of them deal with the kind of fallout from a breakup, but also the eventual death of an ex-boyfriend of mine. He died in 2016, and that was
And what is that song called?
well, there's a lot of them.
Okay. Okay.
There are like 4 or 5 on the new record
Okay.
about that. But Can You Really Be Gone is one. Inventory Your Life is another one.
Okay.
But they, that was like a huge and shocking life event. He committed suicide. So that
I'm
was,
sorry.
thank you. Um, something like that happens and it's completely shocking, and you're just kind of a mess for a while.
Yeah.
So
Even if you're not connected to them anymore, that's
yeah,
still it's
yeah,
still really jarring.
very, very jarring. So these songs on the album that are about that are they're therapeutic for me to write. Just one of those things where you just have to get it out. You have to write about it. You have to make something out of it. I think part of it was, still trying to make there be a reason for it. To create that after the fact, then that's kind of a weird idea. But so yeah, I think a lot of the writing that I do is therapeutic for myself. So it's
Okay.
sort of inward looking. But with this record too, I wanted to kind of try to steer away from that. And there are a couple songs that are more outward looking and considering people as a whole, instead of just considering, the inner workings of my brain.
What's an example of one of the more outer looking songs?
There's one called Patriot.
Yeah, it was the lead single.
Yes, it was. And it was meant to be kind of a big FU to Donald Trump and everything around that. It's really self-explanatory. That
Yeah.
tune is, it was fun to be able to do like an angry rock song. It was super fun in the studio. It's so fun to perform that one. I spent the weeks leading up to the recording kind of listening to some bands that from my youth, or that I wanted these songs to sound like. I think I was
Mm,
listening to a lot of Foo Fighters for that song.
nice.
Yeah, just some stuff that was definitely different from what I had done before.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit. Now that you've mentioned it, I can hear a little bit of like Everlong or like
Yeah,
Monkey Wrench and Patriot.
totally.
That's nice.
Yeah.
What's a song on the album? So I know that, if I'm not mistaken, the 2 singles that you've released so far are Patriot and then Inventory Your Life. What's coming next?
Well, we did put out a third single. It was The Old House. That's an
Okay.
older song of mine,
Okay.
but we recorded it there.
Okay.
So this whole record is out now, but I've got a couple tunes that we recorded in the same recording session that didn't make the cut for the record. So
I see.
I had gone in and like re-recorded some bits of those. So I'll be putting those out as singles. We'll probably do them both at the same time.
Okay.
Not really sure. Probably in the spring, like early spring next year.
Yeah.
A couple new
Yeah.
songs from the same session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Selena, what does your world look like right now? Because the record is out, right? You did the work. And I know from, we're connected on Instagram, so I can see, you've done some like video appearances here and there. What does your role look like as a musician today?
Um, well, my schedule's very open. um, I don't have a whole lot of gigs. I've been feeling a little bit guilty
Do you
because
have gigs right now? Is that
no,
something that's
well,
happening in your world? Okay.
there that's not entirely true. I do have a few
Okay.
gigs. So I also sing in a Western swing band.
Okay.
And my boyfriend plays guitar in that band as well, so it's nice we get to do those shows together.
Nice. And what is that band called?
It's called Hot Texas Swing Band.
Okay.
Yep. And I've done a few gigs with them. We've done some outdoor things, where the stage is away from people.
Okay.
It's so there are shows happening. There are a few venues in Austin that are having shows indoors
Okay.
right now. So I'm not trying to book any of those. I don't really want to be inside with people
Okay.
at this time. So I'm mostly staying away. I've been asked to do a couple of gigs that I've said yes to because the venue is outside and they've been really strict about social distancing protocols.
Okay.
So I feel okay about those kind of shows, but mostly I'm not doing a whole lot. I was going to say earlier, I know a lot of people have been just like writing furiously this for the whole pandemic, just like writing.
Sure.
I have not written shit. I haven't done anything. I haven't
Okay.
done anything. Everyone is kind of handling this differently. And I just started journaling again. I have not put a pen to a page, but
Okay.
then the last month I've been journaling again and I sat down to try to write a song. Didn't go well, but I'm trying to, kind of ease back into it.
Yeah.
It just feels, I don't know, because usually I get ideas when I'm out like observing people.
Yeah.
I don't like to talk a whole lot typically. So usually I'm just watching things happen, and I enjoy doing that, and that's where my ideas come from. So the well's a little dry, but
Yeah.
we'll get there.
Yeah. So, is there anything else that we can talk about in regard to your record? And we'll have a thing at the end where you can talk about where people can find you and where they can purchase the record on vinyl or CD. But like, what haven't we talked about yet that you want to get into?
I did hire a publicist for this record,
Okay.
which I have not done before. It's been really helpful because the last time I had sent out a bunch of CDs and like info sheets just kind of blind. I just sent them out to this press list that I had gotten from a friend and
Okay.
hope for the best and hope to get some reviews, and hope something sticks. But I hired a publicist this time, and
Yeah.
she's been very diligent about getting some write-ups, and had a little write-up in the Austin Chronicle, which is nice. And
Oh,
just
nice.
getting it to like some national outlets so that they'll recognize the name, for next time.
Yeah.
So that was nice. It was nice to have someone else doing something for me.
Yeah.
Instead of just like blindly, flailing, trying to do something by yourself.
And the effort to do it yourself. That's a lot of effort.
It's a lot of effort. It's really
Yeah.
too much for any person to do by themselves, but
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
do it. They do
Yeah.
it. In another print interview I did recently, someone asked, like what was the most interesting thing that happened in the studio? And I didn't really have an answer because I was like, well, I mean, we went in like everyone who played on my album is like a stellar musician. So we went in, we averaged like 4 songs a day. So we just like knocked
Wow.
everything out.
Is that a good sort
It's
of rate?
good. It's really good. Cause you're doing multiple takes of these songs, and especially when everyone's together, the potential
Yeah,
for mistakes is a little higher.
sure.
So we were, just doing like very few takes on these songs, and and would like finish a take and be like, I think that was it. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was it.
Okay.
So, I was just so pleased with how the studio work went. It just, man, it was easy.
It sounds like you all were you're really buttoned up in that way of
Yeah,
like, yeah,
it felt
being able
that
to come
way.
in, like do the songs. I mean, you all had such a clear sense of each other that it was like, and it also sounds like some of the stories we hear about bands recording records, you hear about the drama, right?
Hmm.
Like, oh, that's not the way it should sound, or like someone's instrument is higher in the mix than mine is, like the grumpiness, or but then you
Yeah.
hear the other side, which is like, I think I'm probably going to get this wrong, but there are a few albums that you hear about where like they recorded the entire album in like one take, one shot. Like I think Ozzy Osbourne's first album was like that. Like
Hmm.
apparently the band went in and in one take did the entire album in one go. But that's also not the norm, right? So the dramatics and the one take wonder, like those are not the norm. But 4 songs a day sounds like a really good beat.
It was good. Yeah, it was a good little clip. I do want to mention the musicians. I'm glad we took this time.
Yeah.
Every these everyone on the record are working musicians in town. They play with a ton of people. Have so much experience. They're all better musicians than me by a long shot. But Cat Clemens played guitar. He's also my boyfriend, so I'm a little biased, but I think most people would agree he's one of the best guitar players in town.
Nice.
Lindsey Green played bass. He's been in town for forever. Just a stellar bass player in so many genres. Just perfect. He treated each song as its own thing, and it just beautiful. And James Gwynn, great friend of mine, great drummer. Same with him. That was such a cool thing about the studio too, is how sensitive the players were to everything. Because like these are some super emotional songs, some of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
They're really
and it,
personal for you.
yeah, and where some people might just kind of plow through and play what they always play, these guys were really sensitive and sympathetic to what was going on.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I want to close out the show and ask you 2 questions. And this might be something that we've already talked about that you want to elaborate more on. But what's one of the most important lessons that you've learned so far in your work or in your life in general?
Good question. Um, I think this does apply to music, but also just to life. Is that unless you are like actively on your deathbed, nothing is the end of the world. You know,
Mm,
if you make a mistake, cool, great. You get
yeah.
to learn from it. It's not like I remember being a child and like every mistake I made was like a huge devastation to me. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. What am I going to do? Or like when I was auditioning for musicals, I was auditioning for professional shows when I was in high school. And like my
Okay.
second audition, I didn't get it. I wasn't cast. And I was like, how am I going to get into college? Oh my God. Um, so and it's taken me so long to figure out that like, most stuff really doesn't matter. Like if you don't get something that you thought you wanted, it's okay because something else will
Yeah.
happen. You'll
Yeah.
get to do something else and it's fine. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's like not holding on so much to your idea of what something is and just letting it be the thing that it is. Just like letting your life be the thing that it is with a
Yeah.
few little guiding points.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a version of that question that I like to ask myself and maybe other people in my life, but especially when you've landed on something, right? You kind of like trip over this hole in the ground, and it's this problem that you're like, oh, I've got to figure this out, and I've got to get it right. One of the questions that I ask myself or I ask others is this going to be important next year?
Yeah.
Is this one of those things that is just it feels like I have to solve this or else? Or is it just like I need to figure it out and move on because next year I'm barely going to think of it?
Yeah, that's a great way to see things. I'm going to steal
Yeah.
that from you.
So, Selena, where can people find out more about you? There's the record, of course, and we'll link that in the show notes. But where can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
Yeah. Well, there is my website, selenarosanbalm.com. Also
And
my,
your last name is spelled Rosanbalm.
yes, it is a tricky one. All of the things that the assumptions you would make are incorrect about my last name. Yeah, Rosanbalm. Um, what else? I've got a Facebook and an Instagram page.
Sure.
Same name, of course. The record is available for purchase on my Bandcamp page.
Okay.
You can just search for me on Bandcamp. Yeah.
Well, thank you for making time today, Selena,
Yeah.
and just making the space. Though we've known each other for years, I feel like I've learned so much about you as a person and then also as a musician. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking me. That's very kind, and I appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to How This Works. This episode was edited and mastered by Troy Lococo. Please subscribe and leave us a review in your favorite podcast app. We're just starting, and so it would be super helpful if you could tell just one other person about the show and why they should listen to it. You can find How This Works online at howthisworks.show. It's 3 words, no dashes. Again, that's howthisworks.show. We're also in the places where social media happens. Thanks so much for listening to my episode with Selena. I hope that you got as much out of the show as I have in making it. And we'll talk again soon. Is that something, just as a note, and I don't know if this is going to end up in the show, but I mean, because you're playing with the band and you know these guys that you're playing with, and it sounds like from the way that you describe it, you're taking into account things like social distancing and like the venues being outside. Are you all testing as a group? Just curious, like.
Good question. No, we haven't been. We've been wearing masks, as much as possible when appropriate. I
Okay.
think most of the band is wearing a mask when we play live, except for
Okay.
me.
Okay.
Because we're also concerned about setting an example for people.
Got it.
Like we don't want to be out there, acting reckless or being seen as reckless,
Sure.
when the stakes are so high, especially, oh my God, higher every day.
I know. The numbers are hard to fathom.
It is really awful. But yeah, we're just trying to stay as safe as possible. And I'm getting tested today, actually. So that'll be fun.
Exciting.
It'll be my 3rd test. Yeah.